know, there's a really big question that can profitably be asked. And the question is this: how is a person justified before God? That's a really, really good question. And there are answers, I'm sure, that various people would give and so on, but the Bible presents two ways whereby man is justified before God. One doesn't work. The other one wonderfully does. And I'm going to give you some words here that help to sort of set the stage. We'll start with this: Judaism, Christianity, Old Testament, New Testament, law, grace, man's righteousness, God's righteousness, do and done. Oh, I'm sure we could go quite a ways on this to try to describe the two ways in the Bible whereby man seeks to be justified before God. The first one ended up not working because it says, and we talked about this I think last week, that Jesus set it aside. That is the old way of trying to gain favor with God through your own efforts. He nailed that to the cross. Now, he didn't destroy the law because he came to fulfill the law. But if you look at the law as a way whereby you can earn your acceptance with God, Jesus Christ nailed that to the cross. It doesn't work. It does not work. You know, way back in the 60s, that's before most of you were even born. But anyway, I was witness to a very tragic moment. I talked to this gentleman like 2 hours before this happened. And I noticed he was agitated, but it was just a passing conversation with him, just very much passing. He literally, as I understand it, took the idea from 1 Corinthians 13, the idea of giving your body to be burned. Remember, that's referenced. And he burned himself to death, ignited himself. And from what I understand, his effort was to try to fulfill his ultimate devotion to God. Do you know that works righteousness will lead you to that? Ultimately, if you really think about it, if I thought that I had to earn my way to God, that I had to prove that I'm worthy of his acceptance, and it's up to me to prove my devotion, that'd be the most important thing, of course. And I don't think I'd want to stop at any length to try to prove to the Lord, I am sincere, I really do love you. Thankfully, Jesus nailed all that kind of stuff to the cross. And instead, he fulfilled the law. He fulfilled the law that you and I could never fulfill. We cannot keep the law in its entirety for sure. If you sin in one part, you sin in every part. So it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible to gain acceptance with God, this holy, righteous God, with our own efforts. It's impossible. You'll kill yourself trying. And in fact, let me say this, because some people don't quite understand this, aren't practicing the right view on this, they have headaches and all kinds of problems, Christians, because they're still wondering, does God have a standard that I'm not able to attain? I got to do better, I got to do better, I got to do better. And they keep falling, they keep failing. Jesus has satisfied the demands of the law. That's what it means when he took the law to the cross and fulfilled it. The law is valuable. because it brings us to Christ. I wouldn't know I was covetous if it weren't for the law. It's a schoolmaster to bring us to Christ. But as a means whereby we are justified, does not work. That's why Jesus nullified it, as it were, that part of it, and nailed it to the cross. Okay, the text really that I'm dealing with here this morning, this is just kind of introductory to kind of set the stage. It's, and I'm struggling a little bit with my voice this morning. I've had a cold and I can't quite, so pardon me if I have to have a little struggle here now and then. But anyway, here is the verse from Galatians 2 and verse 20, where Paul says, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life I now live, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. What was it that died? What was it that had to be put to death? Remember Saul of Tarsus, who became later Paul the Apostle? He was a Pharisee, and he was zealous for the law. He even persecuted the Christians, trying to prove to God how righteous he was. After the Damascus Road experience and so on, he realized, I can't do it on my own. The just shall live by faith became a reality. And he realized that law as a means whereby one can be accepted by God does not work. Does not work. Martin Luther left, I suppose, Wittenberg. I have been to that city, and I've looked at the castle door, or the cathedral door rather, where he posted his statements of protest against the Catholic Church. And I visited the church where he preached and the school where he taught. But he went to Rome. He went to Rome and walked the sacred stairs, trying to prove to God that he was worthy of his acceptance. Didn't work. And he discovered as well, the just shall live by faith. So when Paul says, I am crucified with Christ, and really it probably should be in the aorist tense, the past tense, I have been crucified with Christ, because he's thinking about the putting to death, the putting to death of this whole idea that you can earn your salvation with your own effort. So that, I think, helps to kind of explain, I trust, what is really my text here this morning. I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, notice I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life I now live, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. So my friends, anything that has to do with works righteousness, it's got to die. You got to put it to death, because it does not work. Jesus nailed it to the cross. The law is valuable, of course. It brings us to Christ. It's a guide for us, but as a means whereby to be accepted by Christ, by God, does not work. And I'm going to have to take just a little drink of water here. I struggled through the first service, and I've been sucking on cough drops and everything else, but it's the end of a cold. I've just had this problem down through the years. So pardon me. It's embarrassing when you're trying to speak and you have problems with your voice, but so it is. I thought I wanted to talk a little bit also. That's kind of the exegesis of the verse, just a little bit. What it means, I have been crucified with Christ. And I think I've said enough about that. But I want to talk about kind of the practical aspects of being crucified with Christ, what that looks like. And I would give this definition, that God in his wise providence allows, and catch that word, circumstances to develop, so that you and I are forced, as it were, to deal with some of the sin issues in our lives, some of the weakness issues in our lives. And so I thought I'd just illustrate from my own life just a little bit on this. It was a long night. I slept very, very little, because I'd been informed the night before that probably something was coming down the pike that would be very detrimental to me personally and even to our family. It was a relational thing, and incidentally, it never did happen, so don't worry about that. But at the time, I faced, what are we going to do? If this thing happens, what will be the end result? And so in the morning, in the morning, I asked Eleanor, my wife, I said, look, take the devotional that is here by the bed, and let's turn to this date and see what God will say to us. And again, it had been a tough night, and I was devastated. And I expected to hear something like, I, the Lord thy God, will deliver thee. Don't worry, I will deliver thee. I have your back. Your enemies will be routed. Instead, she read these words: how can you see the speck in your brother's eye and can't see the beam in your own? That was one of the best moments in my life. It put to death some self-righteousness, some self-confidence, and a bunch of stuff, and a bunch of pride. It kind of, I wouldn't say it permanently put it to death, but it dealt a pretty hard blow. So that was an occasion for growth. See, that's the way the crucified life works. God allows situations that help us to deal with issues that need to be dealt with. Then I remember another time, and this was also years and years ago. I was going through another difficult experience, and I got a letter from Dr. Tim LaHaye. He knew what I was going through. And if you don't know Tim LaHaye, he was the predecessor, preceded Dr. David Jeremiah at Shadow Mountain. And he said, Dear Dick, knowing what I was going through, he said, an old preacher told me one day that if you're going to make it in the ministry, you've got to grow the hide of a rhinoceros, and God bless you while you grow yours. Oh, Tim, I could use a little encouragement. That was one of those really good moments in my life as well. Oh, so quit feeling, come on, Dresselhaus, quit feeling sorry for yourself. Get over this. Come on, be a man. God's with you. Come on. So that the circumstances, God allowed the circumstances so that some of these weaknesses could be exposed, and I would be constrained to deal with them. Again, it was a pride issue, self-confidence, and various things. I'm very, very sorry about this, but so it is. Then I can be a little more in detail on this third example of a growth moment, kind of a crucified life moment. First Assembly, as some of you know, was originally located down at 6th and Fur, right next to Balboa Park. And I'm just cutting a bit long story very short here. So we had traded our downtown property, in theory at least, for 9.5 acres where the church is presently located, City View is located. And so everything was set to go, but the escrow papers needed my signature as chairman of the board, president of the corporation. And so I was thinking about this situation, and I thought, we don't have any money, we don't have a conditional use permit, and I'm afraid that I'm going to lead this congregation to a moment of demise. There's no way this is going to work. It's just, the leap of faith is way, way too great. So I started looking for ways to get out of it, really. and avoid this great step of faith. And finally, I called a couple of women that my wife and I had gotten to know on the East Coast. And I thought, I'm going to call them and I'm going to explain to them what a big step of faith this really is. I mean, it's maybe presumption and more than faith. You know, I had all kinds of things going on in my mind. So I called them and I explained. I said, you know, here we are. We don't have any money. We're about to sign the documents that will turn our property over to someone else in exchange for the land. So we'll end up with the land, but we don't have any money. And, you know, what do you think about this? You know what they said to me? They said, you are just afraid to fail. Oh. So it's nothing but a pride issue. Oh, it's just a, so that, are you, and this I'm thinking to myself, so this is a pride issue. Okay. I signed the papers and the church was built. God provided the money. God gave his favor with the city. But I didn't want to get out on a limb. It was a step of faith that seemed beyond me. And it was beyond me, of course. And so it was an occasion when I had to deal with, again, big pride issues. Big pride issues. What if I fail? Well, I'll be looked down upon. The whole denomination will say, look at what Dresselhaus has done out in San Diego. I don't know if you've had moments like this or not, but they're growth moments. They're growth moments, and see them that way. It's tremendous growth moments. So we've looked at the verse, the text, tried to kind of take that apart, and I've illustrated a little bit what living the crucified life might look like, those moments when we have growth opportunities. Painful, that's true, but it's essential if we're going to become what God wants us to be. They're growth moments. And I wouldn't be I'd be surprised if it weren't true that there are some here this morning that are going through just exactly that kind of a situation where it looks like the bottom is falling out. You're wondering which way to turn, what to do. But it's a growth opportunities. God has his hand in your life, and he is working things out for good. Just let him continue to work in your life. Okay, so my third thing here this morning, as I was thinking about the crucified life, the Lord took me to the cross, and we talked about it last week as well. And it's like, hey, if you want to see what it is like to be crucified, why don't you listen to the words of the one who was crucified? Why don't you look at the words of Jesus? If you want insight into what it means to be crucified with Christ, why don't you listen to his words? I felt that was a moment of revelation, really. Should have thought of it on my own, of course, but I didn't. But when the Lord kind of witnessed to my heart, I decided that's exactly what I need to do. So I'm going to quickly walk through these last words of Jesus, and then we'll go our way. So I'll try to be brief. You know, when you know there are 7 points, you say, okay, if he spends 5 minutes on each one, we'll be here all day. You know, so that's not what I'm going to do. There are 7, but I'll be brief. The first word is this, from the cross. Jesus said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. It was probably like 9:30 in the morning, something like that, 10 o'clock. When I was a kid, I used to like to count the boxcars on a train. If you were stopped at a crossing, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I've often thought of that image as an example of how we sometimes live. We stash away the offenses we feel. One by one, we fill up our train with offenses so we can remember what happened to us when we were 6 or 7 years old that we've never really forgiven nor forgotten. And we have all these offenses that we kind of store up, stash them away in these boxcars, and chugging down the track of life, pulling that train. You know, friends, unhook from the offenses of life. I'm telling you, just unhook from the offenses of life. Sure, you were hurt 25 years ago. Come on, unhook from that. Jesus is with you. If it weren't for Jesus, I'd say, well, I know you got to just pull him. There's nothing. But he bears all the, he'll take those from you if you'll give them to him. Don't chug down the track of life pulling a train load of offenses, for goodness sakes. Say, I'm not going to do this, Lord. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to just lay this aside. Give it to you. Give it to you, Lord. Are you pulling offenses down the track? Huh? Come on. Sure, you were hurt such and such a time. Yes, I know. You were abused. That's true. But hey, give it to Jesus. Don't pull a train of offenses down the track of life. So there's so much we could say about this, but it's just a word for us to be forgiving. Just to be forgiven. Father, forgive them. You say, but they didn't apologize. If they apologize, I would forgive them. No. This is unilateral forgiveness. Those Roman soldiers didn't apologize to Jesus. You can be sure of that. Not in your life. It's unilateral forgiveness. Didn't excuse them for what they did, of course, but Jesus said, Father, forgive them. So this morning, is there anybody you've not forgiven? Or any situation you've not forgiven? Just say, Jesus, I give this to you. So don't carry the offenses of life. Don't carry the stuff of the past that's burdening you down. Just let it go. Let it go. Father, forgive them. And then you have maybe an hour or so later, you have the words of Jesus. Today thou wilt be with me in paradise. You remember that story. So what should we take from that? What should we take from that? Well, we need to dispense forgiveness, and we also need to dispense grace. And I got thinking about the importance of dispensing grace. Incidentally, I've never been on this road before. This is a new message for us here this morning. Dispensing grace. You know, when somebody cuts you off on the highway, you got a choice. You can either get mad as can be, or you can say, I'm just going to give them a little grace. Who knows what's going on in their life? I'm going to give them unmerited favor. That's what it is. That's what grace is, unmerited favor. Be like a fountain of grace, unmerited favor. People mess with you, and try to just give them the grace. Now, sometimes grace comes with a corrective edge. I understand that. This is not to go easy on that kind of thing. But be a fountain of grace, unmerited favor. I'm telling you, you're living amongst a bunch of people that need it. Unmerited favor, unmerited favor. Oh, yeah, what they did was, but I'm going to just give them favor. I'm going to be like a fountain of grace, fountain of mercy, a fountain of forgiveness, a fountain of grace. And then the next word was probably an hour later or so, and it went like this. Woman, behold your son, and son, behold your mother. Remember? So that Jesus turned his mother over to John the Apostle. You remember the story. I got meditating this. This is incredible. This is absolutely incredible. Jesus Christ is in that most supreme moment in all the history of this universe. He is redeeming lost mankind. He is satisfying the justice of God. He is suffering agony unspeakable. It's the supreme moment of the whole universe, all of time, all of eternity. What's he thinking about? A place for mom. Okay, a place for mom. I thought, that's a reminder to me how we need to be practical. We need to be involved in the work of the Lord. I know that. We need to be committed 100%. We need to be spiritually minded. I know that. But let's not lose our practicality. This thing, you can be so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good. I don't think that's possible, incidentally. But I know what the little saying indicates. It indicates people who they're just impractical. For example, They don't take time to listen to their kids. They're incorrigible to people. And they're not plugged into the reality of life. It's not good. And I think for Jesus, when he's dying, he's saying, oh, a place for mom. Yeah, I don't know if he saw the ad or not. I don't think so. You've seen that, I'm sure. A place for mom. Practicality. Well then, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Probably on in the afternoon. Do you know what? When you live the crucified life, there are going to be plenty of times when you feel abandoned. When you walk close with God, let me tell you, going to be times when you feel alone. That's for your growth and my growth as well. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? When you live the crucified life, there are times you feel abandoned. What you need to learn during those times is just to hang on. When you feel abandoned, just know you're not. Hang on, hang on. Don't give up. Hang on. You can feel so alone, so abandoned, but don't give up. Hang on. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? And then about the thirst. I thirst. That is a physical kind of response. But yeah, I think we can make a kind of spiritual application. You know what? When you live a crucified life, it affects the food that you eat, spiritually speaking. It affects the drink that you drink, spiritually speaking. It affects your value system. You want to thirst after righteousness. You want to hunger after the things of God. So we pick up that thought from those words. And then the words, it is finished. And I feel like what I want to say about that is this. Why don't we live every single day like it's our last? Plan for many, many years, I know that. But live each day like it's our last. Live each day like it's a unit all its own that's got to be successfully completed. For example, you don't have a fight with your wife during the day and go to bed and not take care of it, right? You don't have a tangle with your kids and say, I'm not going to worry about it. You don't have a fight with somebody at work and not deal with it. You got to have short accounts. Got to keep things up to date. It may be your last day. I was reminded as I was thinking about these things, this again, years and years ago. And I was coming north on 805 going up to the church. And I was low on diesel fuel. I drove a diesel car at that time. So I pulled off, I think on University Avenue, I'm not sure. And I was trying to fill my car with diesel fuel, and the pump didn't work right. I had a terrible time. Then I went inside, and the gal at the counter didn't know what she was doing. And that was a bad, bad experience. And I just got impatient. No bad language, no vulgarity, no, but a bad spirit. So I get in my car, head north at 805. What if she's sitting on the front pew next Sunday morning? So I pulled off, I suppose, probably an El Cajon, turned around, went back. I walked up to the counter. I said, ma'am, I was impatient with you, and I'm so sorry. She shrugged it off like it happens all the time. I suppose it does. But I had to deal with that. I didn't want the day to end with that kind of thing undealt with. That's keeping short accounts. That means you hold yourself close. You make demands on yourself. You don't let yourself by with stuff that's not Christ-like. You deal with it. So when you lay your head on your pillow, if it's your last, Now I lay me down to sleep. If it's your last, it's okay. You're ready to pass into eternity because it's finished. Every day needs to be finished. And then with this I close. Then Jesus said, into thy hands I commend my spirit. Do any of you remember Ellis Shaw? He pastored Brooklyn Heights Presbyterian Church, again, years and years and years ago. He was one of the most saintly men I've ever known. This is back in the Orville Butcher, Tim LaHaye days, and Ellis Shaw days, way, way back in the 70s and early 80s. But when Ellis Shaw would pray, ministers, meetings, whatever, he had a habit of saying, Lord, we place this in your hands, and there are none that are better. I have never forgotten that. We're going to place this in your hands. There are no hands that are better. It's just a wonderful thought, isn't it? And we're going to close this meeting this morning by looking at our own lives and saying, what do we need to place in the hands of Jesus? And so I had time, of course, to think about this before the service, so I know what I'm placing in Jesus' hands. And there's something probably you need to place in Jesus' hands. It might be a lost son or daughter, lost as far as the kingdom is concerned at this moment. It might be some challenge at work. It might be an illness problem. But wow, it's something that needs to be put in the hands of Jesus. You just got to do that. Knowing there are no hands that are better, right? There are no hands that are better. So that's what we're going to do. Just stand with me, if you will, please. We're going to just pray. We're just going to pray. Lord, I thank you for this wonderful congregation. I thank you for the spirit of worship in this place early in the service and continues, of course. I thank you for this wonderful text of Scripture. God forbid that I should glory, save in the cross, and then its companion, I am crucified with Christ, and nevertheless I live. Nevertheless I live. Live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. We are people of faith. But Lord, we want to lay some things in your hands this morning. I don't know what it would be for friends here, but you know, they know. I pray it'll be an act, it'll be an overt kind of act, the Holy Spirit, saying, Lord, you know how burdened I am about this. I gotta lay it in your hands. I can't carry it any longer. And there are no hands that are better. There are no hands that are better. I'm going to just lay this in your hands. And maybe as a congregation, we need to lay this church in your hands. Maybe that's a really good thing to do this moment, to lay this church in your hands. Because there are no hands that are better. No hands that are better. I pray your blessing upon every single person that's here this morning. And if there's anyone here who's not in fellowship with Jesus, Lord, I pray they'll surrender their heart and life to you. All you're looking for is a yes. All you're looking for is a yes from their hearts. Lord, draw them to yourself. Draw them to yourself. So, Lord, thank you for this marvelous meeting together. Thank you for the fellowship of believers. Go with us. May it be a great Lord's Day. And may the service this evening be a blessing as well. Cover us with your blood, Lord. Hide us behind your cross. May we keep our eyes upon you. And like I said, like I tried to say last Sunday, may we stay so close to the cross that we hear always the groans of the mighty sufferer of Calvary. Thank you. Go with us and keep us in Jesus' name. And everyone said,